Alright, good evening. How is everyone doing this evening? Good. We're expecting some more people. So hopefully, again, like every month, we have the traffic issues. So we will see more people hopefully walking in as we start the talk. We don't want to get too late. We want to have enough time for everyone. We want to have enough people, be engaged with this and get enough time with the heading for this. So, Meetup is a little bit about the Meetup. This Meetup is for the Agile enthusiasts, product management, program management, development, QA, management, non-managerial people, all of those sorts. It came into existence from something that I've done in my past life, leading the PMI group in Silicon Valley. I still am at the board of San Francisco chapter. My name is Anup, if you don't know me yet. Hi there. All right. So the beauty of this meetup is that we get a lot of good speakers. Good speakers want to come and talk because they're good audiences like yourself all the time. We've been fortunate to get. And also, we've been getting great speakers for all of us. So it's an upward spiral, if you will. So keep showing up here. You actually are helping this meetup grow. So thank you so much. Big round of applause for Visa for being our sponsor. And also a big round of applause for all our volunteers here. We have Smita right there, and also we have lots of other volunteers who probably couldn't join today, but they have been instrumental in the background to get this event that we are experiencing here. So thank you so much to all of them as well. Moving on, we have a certain format of this event. We start now, we go until about 7 o'clock on the main topic. Then we take a break for about 15 minutes, 7 to 7:15. We come back and during that time we do a lot of things. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then we come back and we start our something called lightning talk. Before I go there, I want to know who doesn't know lightning talk. Whose first timer here? Okay, all right. First of all, thank you so much for joining. So lightning talk is a 3-minute talk. You literally count down 3 minutes. And we've seen that a lot of things could come out. A lot of experiences show up. A lot of real good information we get for the evening. So it's a rounding point on top of the main topic. You actually learn 3 more things. So I invite all of you to think about the lightning talk that you could deliver tonight and share with the audience. It's just 3 minutes. Everyone can talk 3 minutes. Everyone can share their experiences about Agile. So Agile in your work as Agile, if you're passionate about Agile, you've been working on the Kanban board at home, you want to know about that as well. I hope you don't do that. But all in all, share your experience. So come see me during the break and give me your name and your topic for 3 minutes. And if you are one of those 3 lucky ones, you get a chance to come here and speak. And that's your name as well. So those are those sticky notes that you would see along with those marker pens that you can use and do that. A little bit about those 3 boards. These are very important ones in order to make our event successful and making an event as formative as we can do in order to serve your needs. So one is called the Starfish or a retrospective board. It's a spider web also. It's called spider web. So that's the retrospective board. We'd like you to put down, again, use your stickies. You're in the Agile world now, so everything is answered with a sticky. So put your sticky right there for either something that you'd like to see started that you don't see in this format yet. So start doing something that you don't want to see. You don't want me to talk so much, for example. Then maybe stop doing and do something less, do something more, or continue doing that you like food. Do keep bringing food here, so we don't stop. Those kind of things. But overall, it's not just about that. It's overall about the event. The other one is takeaways. So we would like to, towards the end, we will be talking about what are the takeaways? What did we learn tonight? So we'll talk about that, and then we will put a few important ones with your help on that dashboard. And third one is a job board. So if you are looking for a job and you would like to be considered for an opportunity, put down your name. Again, use a sticky, don't start writing there. Put your name, email ID, some contact information there, and what are you looking for in a job, like program management, product management, whatever it is. And if you have a job to offer from your organization, then you can display it there as well. You can use the sticky notes and do that, so that way you get great people who have come here, who are interested in the job, and who are interested in this domain right here. So pitch in, and we can go from there. So let's get started with our speaker introduction. So I'm fortunate to have a topic on QA. It's not very much talked about in the Agile world. So we have a great two topics coming together. Something to do with QA, which is development and QA work hand in hand. That's what we understand in a nutshell. And we know there are some Agile practices that these Scrum Masters, program managers, sometimes even management keep on pushing on people, right? It should not be that way, but that's how it's perceived. Now tonight, we're going to hear from a speaker who actually started in QA and was working successfully in that area. Our company decided to delve into Agile and started exploring how they can transform their shop into a total Agile shop. And that's where our speaker actually got engaged and got into it, started leading some of those initiatives, started to do a lot more things in there, and got great experiences. So from that, she started going to different organizations and got into transformation of the QA or into the Agile QA. So don't want to steal the thunder of other things that she wants to talk. I would like to introduce Elle Baurer. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and I hope you have a good time and that you get great experience with our audience. So
thank you. Thank you for the introduction. You make me sound way cooler than I actually am, but I'll do my best to address as many topics as I can when it comes to QA. And I'll start first with a little bit. Is that better? Okay.
Much better.
So I'll talk about QA in general a little bit, and it took quite some time to do this presentation, and I went a lot of back and forward, so bear with me if there is anything that seems unclear at the moment. Please interrupt me, ask me questions all the time. At the end of it, I hope it all makes sense for you. But it's something that I'm really passionate about, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. So I really thought it would be a great idea to share it with you. So let's go with the introduction. So my name is Elle. Friends call me Elle. I love photography, hiking, reading. I love going to the beach. I love traveling. Actually, I don't love traveling. I don't like traveling. I love being places. I can eat pizza for every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I have read Harry Potter more times than I care to admit. We're talking about more than 50 probably. I don't like ice cream. Well, I do not like ice cream. If ice cream was the only food on earth, I would starve myself to death, but I do not like it.
More for us.
I don't like traffic, but who does like traffic at the end of the day? And I don't like bad manners. Some other interesting facts about me, I played the piano when I was little, and at the age of 5, I used to play Bach and Beethoven, and I really wanted to be a world famous pianist. Didn't happen, obviously. And I've been to Paris more times than I can count on my both hands. And I think for everyone that wants to go to Paris, totally worth it. Spend all your life savings and go there. It's amazing. It's a great city. So looking at that, I don't know how I turned out here. I don't know how I turned out in IT or in Agile or in any of the facts, but I love it. It's something very different than what I did, but when I was 18, when I decided to go to school, I said computer science looks like the way to go, and from there I went into computer science, and once I decided to find my first job, I figured out development's not the right thing for me, and I wanted to do QA. This is something that I'm really passionate about quality of product, about making sure that we deliver satisfaction to customers and to people that use those products, and so that's how I ended up doing it. The takeaways from the presentation today that I have at least put I'll go for myself, for you, to get hopefully is how to create a QA mindset that enables your teams to be successful when we talk about creating quality products. The second one is how to navigate around all the interlocking QA efforts throughout a release without having to do very heavy code freezes or very heavy release freezes, sprints, and testing efforts towards the end of your deliveries. And then how to create mindfulness within your QA efforts. So the method that I don't want to say I devised, because probably somebody thought about it before me, because there are a lot of people on the planet and they think about everything. There's nothing, I feel like there's nothing innovative here, but it's based on 4 books. So those are my favorite books, outside of hard college books, but The Goal from Elle, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team from Patrick Lencioni, Blink Thinking from James Womack, and Agile Testing from Lisa Crispin. So those things were kind of my pillars when I started my transition in Agile, and they kind of turned into my pillars later on as I was leading teams to different transition. I pretty much swear by Patrick Lencioni's books. They're really great. They're not typical Agile books. They talk a lot about organizational health and organizational development. But they're really great when it comes to thinking of how to create a mindset in your organization that's targeted towards teamwork and being and enabling Agile in your organization. 5 Dysfunctions of Team is particularly big on that. The Goal is theory of constraint. So this is a book that introduces theory of constraint. Elle Baurer is the person that introduced theory of constraints in the 1900s, and this is a very interesting management technique that actually tries to manage people and manage projects around resources. And I'll talk a lot about that. And the link for me and Agile testing, I'm not gonna say anything additional. So let's move to our presentation. So how often have you heard these statements while either as a QA or working as a QA? Is it okay to split stories into development and testing and complete them in different iterations? I'll be really grateful if people tell me they've heard that statement or not.
Yeah, sure.
All the time? Okay. We cannot accept the story because we didn't manage to test it on time. Ever heard that one? Yeah, all the time. We found last minute defects, so we need to carry over that story to the next sprint so we can complete it. We found that last minute hidden requirement. So we changed the code, but we didn't have time to test it. We carried a story over in the next sprint, but now we're towards the end of that next sprint, and that story is still not completed. I see people nodding here. And we're a week away from the release, and we're still finding issues, and I don't know how we're gonna release, because, code changes are still happening. Or we're a day away from the release, and the developers keep changing in the code, and we don't have time to test it again. And we can never seem to accommodate testing efforts within the time frame required, no matter how long a sprint is. Whether it's 1 week, whether it's 3 weeks, whether it's 4 weeks, it never seems to have time for that. And I can probably add more and more to those statements when it comes to QA. So it always seems that there are a lot of challenges when it comes to how you adopt QA in Agile. And so, to get that start of this presentation, I kind of decided to go online and look at what are the different common challenges and kind of gather through a lot of sources and look through why are people always seem to be unhappy, what they find challenging in QA. So I kind of put it in a few categories. So the first one is time-boxed development. So it seems that because all the sprints are time-boxed, we have a very limited time for code turnaround. So that leads to being able to maybe run a first set of tests during an iteration, but not go back and do a second set of tests. An inadequate test coverage. So very often you're so limited into exactly what you're trying to do and to achieve it on time. So you end up skipping tests, you end up cutting corners, you end up not doing everything you're supposed to do or a few you're supposed to do in order to make it happen. So that kind of goes and makes your done criteria really, really, really fuzzy. Then, how often do you notice that the sprints actually become mini waterfalls? We used to call them puddle falls. On a waterfall, puddle fall. You start, you look at the requirements, then you develop, then you put them in a test environment, then go back and forth, and then you do it. And then eventually, next sprint happens because you're still not done testing. Then what about performance? Working on performance and resolving performance issues. So unless you work on a very, very small application that is going to be used by one user exclusively and never communicate to anything outside in the world, you will be thinking of that performance in general, of the performance of the application in general. If you work in a company that provides enterprise products to enterprise organization, you have to think a lot about performance and a lot about how your system behaves. If you work into a SaaS provider where you have penalties of how if your system is down, you have to think about performance. You can't just throw it away. Then it comes to the whole ownership of testing. So we talk about Agile and we talk about this great idea of a team that does do everything. They test, they develop, they run automation. They're so mature and they're so great, which is perfectly fine. But you have inheriting division of roles. So when you start your transition, and even sometimes very, very few years after you start your transition, you have an inheriting division of roles. Who does QA and who does development? And a month or two ago, I was here and correct me if I'm wrong, the speaker, his name was Karim Bishai. I think he talked about organizational structures which are extremely fluid, where people come in to fill in a role. But he again talked about the roles as you have a QA role, you have someone that you have that skill set that's required to come up with the different scenarios, to come up with the ideas how to test the product. And unless you talk about this one organization where people come in and out of the team, again, within your team, you will have people that have more specific skill set to do one thing or more specific skill set to do another thing. And then that inherited division of roles leads to a lot of isolation and separation between within the team, no matter how close you are, no matter how great your team is, one of you ends up being the QA, the other one ends up being the QA, the developer, and you have that interaction whether you like it or not. And then very often the QA and the quality-minded people in the team are very often seeing the ones to beat the negativity drum. It's like, this is not working, we don't have time, we haven't an hour tested, time's running out. They don't seem to say anything positive, and that's not fun at all. And being in that role, that hasn't been fun for me. Actually, I can't believe I have a recommendation on LinkedIn that says she knows how to say bad things in a nice way. Great, I'm so happy about that. But you don't want that. You don't want to be the only negative person in the world. And then more about all of this. And this is not, again, an exclusive list. But testing is not only about functional testing and automation. Testing is so much more than that. Testing, if we talk about exploratory testing, when we actually stray out of the ordinary path, when we try to find ways of how the system can be broken so that we can find the not typical ways of the usage. I've worked with some really great QAs that have been genius in exploratory testing and have found defects that have saved the company a lot of time and money just because they strayed out of the functional, positive, negative case scenario and thought out of the box, had the time to explore the product. Stress testing. Again, back at the point of large-scale products, you need that. What if your server or what if your application goes under a denial of service attack? How you're going to test it? How do you know how the application behaves? That requires time. That requires time to write scripts. That requires time to write the tests themselves. That requires time to run the test. Then you have performance testing. So testing on its own takes 2 to 4 weeks to just understand how the system behaves. Again, working in a system as working in performance testing teams, I found out that you have defects that will come up in the system after 2, 3, 4 weeks of usage. Just normal usage. Just as your database gets fuller and fuller of data, all of a sudden, everything crashes. You cannot afford that. You cannot afford that because in testing environment, everything is so pristine, so clean. You reinstall the build, make sure everything's nice and configured. Customers don't work like that. Scalability testing. Does your system scale? If you're working on services, SaaS solutions, it's really important. Then you have security testing. How many of you do extensive security testing on their products? I know one guy, 2 guys there too, but it's really, really important because think about all the different reports. Oh, maybe I hear a lot of them because I'm constantly dealing with researching toys for kids and baby monitors and stuff, and now a lot of the toys that support Bluetooth or internet connectivity, so you can configure them so your little kid can play, turn out that they have vulnerability, whereas a perfect stranger can connect to them and talk to your kid through those toys, just being within the range of either Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi, the proprietary Wi-Fi, because the toy manufacturers haven't thought about the security aspect of things, talking about all the different devices that we introduced to our houses, like the Nest thermostats and the cameras and the Amazon devices. I perfectly trust those companies that they're doing their heavy security testing, making sure that my privacy cannot be accessed outside of my house. And then you come with regression testing. Okay, one area here where we can be fully confident that we can automate that, all the other functionality. Usability testing. How do you automate usability testing when you actually, the whole purpose of usability testing is experiencing the product as a user would experience it? And I haven't completed the list. So just looking at that list, it's huge. And I've worked on products that require each one and every one of those types of testing. And when you go to the point where you have to complete everything in 3 weeks, or you want to release in a month, again, soap test, 4 weeks. What if an issue comes up? Becomes almost impossible. Then we go down to the continuous integration and deployment path, right? So we say, okay, everything has to be continuously integrated, deployed. We always have to be pushing a button. Everything goes out in the cloud or in the system. But in the reality, you have broken bits. You have inadequate automation, which cannot ensure that although the build is past automation, it's not actually broken. There's no aspects of it broken. Then some places have very strict organizational policies of approval as far as which builds can be applied to what servers that require a lot of actual manual verifications and approvals and signatures. And again, you cannot automate that. And then, depending on the situation where you're at, you can have lack of proper infrastructure builds, maintaining and version control, and it's kind of, those are kind of basic things to think about and to say, well, everybody should have that. That's kind of a common sense, but not everybody does. And then we go to the other part where it comes to user stories and requirements that very often we complain about QA, like why is not testing done? Well, we didn't have sufficient information. The acceptance criteria were not there or weren't clear. Lack of focus of the team working on multiple projects. I don't know if any of you here is in a situation where you have a team that works on stories and delivers stories on multiple projects, and each one of those projects can have a different release date and release timeline. So how do you manage that? How do you actually finish a successful sprint when you have 5 priority 1 items? And then last minute changes. Last minute changes when something's not working right, and or the product manager looks at a review and says, I don't like it this way. We need to move that. And we encourage that, right? In Agile, we want to encourage all that. We want to encourage all these changes and everything of that happening. But how do you gain control? Like, how do you make sure that you can complete everything and you still have visibility and control on your system? And then all the rest. So you have, I already talked a little bit about the complexity of the environment. Products, very often when they go out to the market, they don't work alone. They have to work in a very complex environment. They communicate with other products, and that goes back again to the testing part. You can't just say, okay, our product installs on these 5 operating systems. Did you test it? Did you know for sure it installs and works okay, and you can compare it from system to system and it's the same? Integration testing with third-party components. You say our product supports these 3 types of directories or these 3 types of databases. Did you test it? Did you know for sure? Or you tested with only one of them and claim because we developed it to do the rest, they actually do it. There is a very, very funny motto that we always say in QA: trust but verify. So we trust. We know everybody has their best intentions, but we need to verify. We can't just do that. And then the last part that is my favorite: standard compliance and quality. So Agile is a perfect tool. So I might actually, all these sites might actually position me in the point where I'm kind of like, you're pretty much telling us that Agile is not going to work because of all this. So, but it works, and it's great, and it's put in a very tough position for us to make it work for us. A lot of companies that deal with pharmaceuticals, that deal with banking systems, they have to go through rigorous auditing processes, through rigorous standard processes where you have to have documentation to support that you've verified something, that you've tested something, that you cannot just move on, right? So you have to have the documentation to support it, and you can't just say, we don't value the documentation, or we don't want to document because you've wasted our time. We need to do it. So how do we do all that and still be successful and move fast? So that's the $1 million question, right? So before I go there, I'll take you back to a little road trip. So bear with me for a little bit because I want to review with you a few very, very, very basic definitions. And they are really important for me. So the first one, the first definition is, what is quality assurance? What is QA? So can I have a couple of people tell me what is QA for them? Any volunteers?
Checking if quality is assured in the product.
Okay.
And ensuring that it is there.
Okay. Anybody else?
Things well as expected.
Okay.
Sure, stakeholders, expectations.
Okay. Getting a little closer. Anybody else?
Demonstration of a high confidence through trials that the product is working as expected, but repeated testing so that you have a confidence rate that's at least 95% or more, something like that, with a tolerance.
Okay. So I agree with each one of them. And I'll go, and the first definition I will show you, which is the dictionary definition of quality assurance. And so the dictionary says that the maintenance of quality assurance is the maintenance of desired level of quality in a service or product, especially by means of attention to every stage of the process of delivery and production. Okay, so the definition in the dictionary doesn't talk about testing, doesn't talk about any of that. It says maintenance of the desired level of quality at every stage through the process. So that means that we talk about more than testing. We talk about every stage of the process. Requirements to begin with, development, testing, delivery, maintenance, and so on and so forth. So we have every stage. Second definition is my personal favorite, which is from Wikipedia. And I did not edit the picture, so I did not write that. But it says quality assurance is a way of preventing mistakes or defects in manufactured products and avoiding problems when delivering solutions or services to customers. Okay, so this first part is about preventing mistakes or defects. Quality assurance compromises administrative and procedural activities implemented in a quality system so that requirements and goals for a product of or a service or activity will be fulfilled. And so I'm just reading through some of the lines here which I find the most important. But then quality assurance includes two principles. Fits for purpose, that means that the product should be suitable for the intended purpose, and right first time. Mistakes should be retained, which means that once you install the product does what it says it does, and it does it correctly. And then the last one, which is to your point, suitable quality is determined by the product user, client, or customers, not by society in general, not by the QAs, not by the developers, not by the product managers, but by the people that actually use your product. Which means that you can have a product that has 10,000 known issues, but your customers are happy. Is that a quality product? Yes, because those issues are known to you and your customers are fine. You can have a product that has 0 known issues, but you can have an escalation every single day of a customer saying that product is failing or is not doing something they're supposed to do. Now at that point, you cannot claim that that product is of a sufficient quality anymore. So that's not a quality product. So the two things I want you to remember from this part is that quality is subjective. And then the second part is quality is about prevention. It's not about testing in quality, it's about building in quality. Making sure that you build quality in every in every step of your product so that you can deliver a quality product at the end. The next basic I'm going to take you through, kind of gave away that, is what is Agile. So I'm not going to ask everybody what is Agile. I'm just going to go straight to the definition, and I will tell you why I do that. So Agile Alliance defines Agile as Agile software development is an umbrella term for a set of methods and practices based on the values and principles explained in the Agile Manifesto. Solutions evolve through collaboration between self-organizing cross-functional teams utilizing the appropriate practices for their context. Okay, so again, very, very important. Solution evolve through collaboration between self-organizing cross-functional teams utilizing the appropriate practices for their context. The Wikipedia part. Agile software development describes a set of values and principles, and it advocates adaptive planning, evolutionary development, early delivery, and continuous improvement, and it encourages rapid and flexible response to change. So, I'll just leave the manifesto a little bit here. I bet all of you have seen it. Hopefully all of you know it by heart. Maybe not, it doesn't really matter actually. You have the 12 principles of Agile. So when I look back to the challenges that I listed in the beginning, it's starting to seem to me that everybody is trying to conform to something, to one perfect vision of Agile. The amount of times, like I literally, if I've had a dime, the amount of times I've been asked, what is the perfect length of an iteration? 1 week or 3 weeks or 4 weeks? I don't know what you're trying to do. What are you trying to do? I'll tell you what's your good length, but what are you trying to do? Well, no, tell me what's the perfect length? I don't know. What are your challenges? Well, it doesn't matter. Should it be 2 weeks? I don't know. Really, I do not know. Because my favorite example is NASA. So if you look at every single project that NASA does, every single mission into getting something out of space, that's Agile. That's crazy lengthy Agile, which it takes them weeks and months and years and years and years to deliver. Looking at the Mars mission, at all the different steps, they sent the little Mars rover. How many years later they sent Curiosity? The goal of Curiosity was to ensure proper landing. If I read correctly, in all my side reading, the next mission will be trying to figure out if somebody will be able to actually pull away from Mars and just go somewhere. And they're doing every single thing is they're doing a very large sprint to ensure that they can be successful. And they do one mission, and they do a second mission, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth until they get there. They send empty shuttles, they send animals, they send a person. Then they returned the person, then they went to the moon, and so on and so forth. In the way they do things, it's actually very, very Agile. I don't know if they call it Agile. I don't know if they do, but they constantly adapt, they constantly learn, they constantly change to achieve what they're trying to do. Would they be successful with 2 week sprints? No, no way. They're successful with what they do. So I digress a lot about that, but it's very important to remember what Agile is about. Agile is about finding the solution that works to you, finding the solution and adapting it in a way that works for your organization, looking at all the benefits, looking at all the challenges, and making that one solution that makes you successful, and not go to a stereotype, not going to a place where you say, this is how it should be, 2 week sprints, 10 people teams, and so on and so forth. So, I'll go through only one slide, and then I think we can bring it in. So this is my drawing. I have the drawing skills of a 3-year-old, but I really love them because I did it myself with a pen and paper and colorful markers, and that's a very, very butchered, very extremely butchered presentation of a production plan. If anybody here works in a production plan, please ignore everything else I'll say, because probably it's not going to be correct, because I've never in my life been in a production plan, but I've read a lot of books about it, and they say that's how it works, at least in my imagination. But, okay, so you have different parts. So the goal of the production plan is to produce some products that go out to customers. Very often these products, although here looking like the same boxes, are very different. A lot of plants actually customize their products and their machines that they do for their customers. Also, very often what happens is they go through different processes to kind of go and manufacture every part or combine it with another part. Sometimes they have to put stuff in like these big industrial ovens and so on and so forth, until the end where they reach into a final assembly line. At that final assembly line, everything gets put together as a whole, then goes through some quality control where they verify that things are done as they're supposed to do. Very often at the different stages there is a quality control in between to make sure that as the part is produced, it's actually fitting certain criteria that they're expected. Then the whole thing, the good ones get shipped, the bad ones get scrapped, and you're good to go. So why do I talk about production plan? Because that's a very good illustration why everybody starts blaming testing and quality when it comes to delays and to something wrong happening in the system. When you start moving a part through the system, it moves with a certain speed. And at any point, different problems may arise where it will slow it down. But there are a lot of dependencies. If we look at the first two, the yellow part needs to go through machine A and machine B. And then the green part goes through machine blue. And then it gets combined, where it gets combined with the yellow and turns into a blue part, right? I'm talking very scientific here. But what if the first machine where the yellow part goes into has a malfunction? Means yellow parts can't be produced. Means that they can't go through their life in the system. Means that now you have a whole lot of blue parts waiting for their assembly. And then that red one and that brown one go through their path as they're supposed to do, and all of them start waiting at the assembly line. And when you get to the assembly line, you're like, we have all this inventory here, we have all these parts here, we can't do anything, nothing's coming out, what's wrong? And so that's when you find out that there is a delay. So that's why you find out that there's something wrong, and the assembly line is very often the one that actually starts raising any red flags unless the production plan has proper setup to actually raise those flags earlier and address them. So something similar happens within QA. When you don't build quality at every step in your process, when you don't ensure your commitments and deadlines are being met at every single step of the process, you become into this situation. When one of your dependents breaks, and then they roll over until you finally get to, we didn't have time to test it. Because by the time if your product is delayed, most likely the issue would have been resolved. Because the people working on it know that, for example, a broken build or a broken machine needs to be fixed right away. So by the time the person from the assembly line goes up the chain and finds out what's wrong with the system, that system would already be working. That system would already be producing parts, and you'd be like, so what happened? Well, 3 hours ago we had an issue, we resolved it, now everything's moving, but then the deadline's the same, the people at the assembly line are scrambling, they can't finish on time, and that's when you find it. So, with that picture in mind, and with, I hope not boring you with a whole bunch of theoretical stuff, I'll say we can have a break, and then I'll continue with the second part.
Absolutely. Great topic and great segue into a break right now, but we'd like to learn more about this assembly line. It looks pretty real to me. How about you? Okay, let's take a break. See me if you have a topic in mind for a 3 minutes lightning talk. I already have one person coming on the stage. We need 2 more. So there, 3 minutes talk. Come back, give me your name and your topic. And so the best thing is I already see things getting populated there. Some nice colored stickies. I love it. Keep it coming. Again, use a block 2 feet. What that means is you don't have to keep sitting here. When you feel like getting up and writing something on the feedback or on the takeaways, do that. It's an informal setting. You're allowed to do that. Okay. Coming back, so as I promised, and this time, thank you for all these 3 people who actually volunteered to talk for 3 minutes. It's great 3 lightning talks here. I see the very first one is called The Original Sin. That's by Smita. Thank you, Smita. And look at the dedication here. It's a 3-minute talk, and she has slides. Oh, really? Okay, all right.
Wonder what this has to do in an Agile meetup? Well, this is the first documented communication.
Love it.
In the Garden of Eden, there were many trees, but there was one tree known as the tree of knowledge, which came with special instructions. But Satan, in the form of a serpent, managed to create a communication problem. The woman said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you must die. You will not certainly die. The serpent said to the woman. She was convinced. She ate the fruit and shared with her husband. And did they actually die? No. And yes, they did not physically die, but they did spiritually, and were expelled from the Garden of Eden. What if Adam and Eve were Agile enthusiasts and thought about checking with God for clarity? What if they believed in feedback loops? We would have been still in the Garden of Eden, walking like this. It would have been very bad for the clothing business. Jokes apart, as an employee engagement lead working for CyberSource in Visa, I see communication is the greatest challenge, especially for working with distributed teams. When we look at Agile Manifesto, we see individuals and interactions over processes and tools are more valued. Why? Communication. Communication can make or break a project or a product. As an employee engagement lead, I have planned and hosted events without inviting all the intended participants. Now, communication is one of the biggest or most important item on my checklist that I work on. It is a big challenge to overcome every day, every project, every event. As a great leader, be a great communicator. This is one of our leadership principles in Visa. A great leader communicates openly, effectively, promotes a shared vision, and values others' perspectives. Thank you. This was it. 3 minutes.
That's great. Thank you. Before we go further, I just was watching YouTube, and this was so funny to see a similar example here. You know, they, in the Garden of Eden, ate an apple, and they were expelled. And here on earth, we are told to eat the same apple every day to avoid like, not matching up. This is not my original thing. So I just heard on the YouTube, and it was amazing. Something wrong here. The next one is Auditing Agile by John. Thank you, John. You can start now.
Sort of a, and you've been waving down because I don't have much with me. So this is an unusual topic. You think of Agile and auditing sort of being at opposite ends of the spectrum. But we recently, Pallavi and myself are from the auditing department here at Visa, and we audited Agile practices within Visa, and there's 8 development organizations. And what we did is we took the 12 principles and put them on a radar chart, and then we sort of measured the compliance to those principles and the adoption of those principles by each organization. And we noted that there were 8 very distinct approaches to using Agile, and they had adapted it to each organization. Now, as auditors, we always want to look at standardization processes and things that work the same wherever they are for efficiency and compliance. And instead of bringing in a subject matter expert from the outside who was an auditor, we actually went out and got a Scrum Master and had him sit in on the retrospectives and the meetings and all of the different activities. And that's how we gathered a lot of our information. And what we found out is that the best way to approach the problem was exactly how they were doing it. Each team had taken and adapted Agile to fit what they needed to do within the business constraints they had. And so we found that there were a few areas we had some suggestions for improvement. Some of them were to do with communication and improving how they were communicating their results to management and how they were communicating among themselves as teams. But in general, we found that the adaptability of the groups was really very, very effective. And they were able to get their job done, fit within the Agile framework, but adapt it to what they needed to do. So we had an audit that produced no significant findings. That's always good. We like to make sure Visa is working and doing the things it should do. But for the people that we were auditing, they were sort of surprised because they were expecting us to come in with a set of rules and regulations about the way auditing should work. And they were quite surprised that instead we were looking at it, how do you as developers be successful? And so I just sort of leave you with that thought that auditing, it throws rocks at us all the time. We're really there to try and improve the company. And I think that fits with Agile. You have to be adaptable. You have to be able to communicate. You have to work as part of a team to make that happen.
I never thought auditing could be Agile. So there's a whole different topic here. But we should try to find a great topic on that and bring this together as well. The third one, and the final one, is a person who actually teaches and evangelizes Agile as well in the community. His name is Deshpande. Deshpande, you want to come up? And the topic is Agile is learning. Thank you, Deshpande.
Thank you. So, my topic is Agile is learning, right? Smita spoke about this original sin. So, I have a sutra. It's a Sanskrit sutra. It's a very ancient sutra that talks about what learning is. Okay? And instead of telling what the sutra is in a foreign language to you, let me just give you the gist of it. The sutra breaks down learning into 4 parts. It says learning can come from 4 different areas. Okay? The first area is, it says, from a teacher. So you can learn from someone else who has the knowledge. That is one way of learning. The second part, it says, is through self-effort. So you put in effort, experiment, and learn. Right? 2 methods. The third, it says, is through fellow practitioners. Go to meetups, right? Sign up to Anup's meetup, come here. Learn from others who have made mistakes, or learn some other way. And fourth and the final thing, it says, is you learn with time. Okay? So the gist of this sutra is that learning comes from not 4 different areas, but actually all the 4 areas. And if you really want to learn something, put yourself in a place or ask yourself, are you allowing opportunity for all the 4? And this is true in Agile. I feel my definition of Agile is basically Agile is just learning. Are we learning? If you are doing all these 4 things, then we are learning. In terms of practice, in terms of habit, whatever, right? So that is a simple sutra I thought I would share with you. Apply that, test it, and I have found that to work in many different ways. So if I teach a class, I'll make sure all these 4 components are part of it. If I'm learning something, I'll make sure these 4 things are part of it. If I'm coaching an organization, I'll make sure there is opportunity for all of them. You got to have all these 4 components, right? So, teacher, learning from an expert, self-effort, learning from peers, and allowing time to let the concept sink in. That's my spiel. My name is Deshpande, like Anup said. I also run a meetup. If you have time this Thursday in Sunnyvale, we have a great speaker coming all the way from Colorado. He's going to speak on a scaled Agile framework and the role of project management in Agile. He's a co-founder, not a co-founder, but he's a SAFE fellow, and he's a great speaker. So if you have time, sign up. The name of the meetup group is Bay Area Scaled Agile Network, and it's in HPE in Sunnyvale. It's a free meetup as well.
Right on time. So cool. Yeah, we definitely want to learn from all the possible avenues, and one of the avenues is this, one of the other avenue is in Sunnyvale. There's another meetup, actually, if you know or if you want to go to, that is by Stacy Louie. It's called the SBALN. That's the Silicon Valley Agile Leadership Network. So visit all 3. Or if you're interested in fintech, there are other meetups as well. So meetup.com is your friend. Yeah?
There is another Agile meetup with Stacy Liu in Tri-Valley as well, Pleasanton area.
Pleasanton area. So wherever you live, there's a good vast network of Agile practitioners and Agile enthusiasts, I would say. So with that, we'll continue with Elle.
So, here's your. So, my last basic part, what is the ultimate goal of product development, be it software or any other product? Satisfaction.
So about
Development habitat using wells.
Customer satisfaction. Okay. Any other thoughts? So, I'll use a quote right here from the book I talked about. The ultimate goal is to make money. Okay, so many of you may disagree with me, and it's not a very nice statement to make. But that's why we do things, to make money. Whether we like it, whether we not, whether we like to see ourselves as philanthropists that don't care about money, we do everything to make money. We develop products, we go to work to be able to get money, to pay our bills. So this is the one thing that's very important to remember, is that we do things with one purpose. We don't do it just to develop a great quality product. Because a great quality product that doesn't make money is going to be shelved. It's going to be sitting in a company, it's going to be, people might work for it, eventually it's going to be shelved. Nobody wants a product that does not make money. A crazy bad quality product that gets to the customers, and the customers might be super unhappy about it, but they still buy it and keep paying subscriptions or keep buying it. It makes money, so it will survive. Because at the end of the day, they don't care about quality. Nothing else matters. It matters the final revenue. So, how do we make all of this happen? So I counted them, and I realized that my whole presentation is about 40-something slides, and 26 of them I spent on the basics. So thank you very much for putting up with me and listening to that first part. But now I'll talk about the mindset change. In my introduction, I said that I will introduce to you a mindset change to make you successful and to help you think of quality and create quality within your products, and quality as defined, be able to implement it and be able to meet the customer expectations. So, what I kind of came up with that name, the mindful process. To be honest, completely honest, I have not Googled it. I have no idea what it comes up when you say a mindful process or something like that. It really expresses what I'm trying to convey, so that's how I name it. And I also didn't Google it because most probably, again, somebody thought about it before me, and I'll be very, very disappointed that it's not my baby. So here's that. So this is the mindful process. I talk about mindfulness a lot, and it is a term that comes from yoga and from meditation, and it's pretty much about creating awareness, being in the now, being in the within your current situation, spending your full attention on that one situation you're in without much distractions, and to be fully dedicated to it. The reason why I called it a mindful process is because this is something that's created with a lot of mindfulness. When you are in this situation, when you are within the product, within the team that you're working with, making a solution that fits their needs, making a solution that creates the proper energy for them to be able to be successful and produce good products and meet the company goals. So there are three elements to that process: lean thinking, managing constraints of critical chain management, and empowering the team. So there are three things: lean, constraint management, and people. So I'm not going to spend here too much details, but I'm going to go through two or three of the things. So the first thing when I get into working with people is I have my lean mantra. So this is the something that I've kind of extracted from Lean and from its principles that I believe works very well. And there are three things to that. The first one is question the status quo, eliminate waste, and people first. So I'll talk about all of them in a little bit. So question the status quo. Very often, very often, we get comfortable with routine. People tend to look for routine. Whether we realize it or not, it's something that it makes us comfortable. It makes us safe. I have an almost 3-year-old, and his life is about a routine. Waking up at the same time every day, nap time every day, lunch time every day, going to bed every day. It's the small rituals. Like if I don't serve him the lunch on the right plate, he gets upset. And so this is something that you grow up with. Then you go to daycare, a whole lot of more routine. Then you go to school, talking about a year long of routine. And you kind of get comfortable, you look for that routine. But we need to avoid it. Being agile means we need to question what is going on around us. So focusing on continuous improvement, focusing on being unhappy with where you are right now and looking for the problems, looking for how to solve them, looking for how to improve and to get better. The whole reason why we have Agile and why we talk so much about evolution, about constant change, is because what made you successful yesterday is not going to make you successful tomorrow. It's not the same. It will change. What your customers want from you yesterday, it's going to be different tomorrow. So constantly questioning the status quo, constantly focusing on continuous improvement is something very important. The first thing that I usually look at is retrospectives. Retrospectives should not be routine. Retrospectives are the heart of your team. Is where change happens, where improvement happens. Retrospectives are the point where you analyze your current situation, you set your goals, and you try to get better, try to move further along the way to get to your goals. I don't like traditional retrospective. What went well, what went wrong, what are we going to do next? Everybody, I've literally seen a team where they come into a retrospective, sit down at the table, get their post-it and start writing. And I'm like, hold on, what are you writing? Well, what went well, what went wrong? Well, I don't want you to tell me what went well and what went wrong. I want something different. I want something to get your brains moving, to realize where is the status quo? What are we going to question today? So this is something very, very important, is paying attention and making your retrospectives healthy. Great books about retrospectives, Agile Retrospectives from Diana Larson. This book is amazing. It has so many ideas, so many different ways to do a retrospective. There are so many agile games that you can incorporate into retrospective to get people involved, to get people moving, and to understand where do you need to go. Like, not only what's not working, but where do you need to go, how do you change it, and then a very thorough follow-up on those retrospectives. Retrospectives are not there to just be put on the board and forgotten. Retrospectives are there to think about them, talk about them, do every single day after we finish the retrospective of what we committed to. Not just forget. And this is my first step. This is the first and most important thing that drives all change, is make sure you question the status quo and you're ready to move on and you analyze the situation. The second part here is eliminate waste. So the definition of waste is very kind of subjective, but it's pretty much everything that would not drive you to be successful and to reach your goal. when the goal is eventually making money. That goal can be dissected so that it fits your team and can be translated down to your team. But anything that doesn't help you towards that goal is a waste. I'll give you a couple of examples that I think are really good examples for eliminating waste. But the first one is defects. So I talked a little bit ago about a product that has 5,000 or 10,000 defects. And I worked with a product that had 5,000 defects in their backlog. Nothing serious. A comma missing here or there. Something not being saved correctly. It's just random small things that nobody cares about. Some of those defects were being logged 5 years ago. Why they're still there? Nobody cares about them. Nobody fixes them. As a matter of fact, every time you go to do a release plan, you have to go through every single one of these defects and assess, are we going to fix it in the next release? Is it going to finally make it or not? 9 out of 10 times the question is not. But you've lost an hour. And you've not only lost an hour of yourself, you've lost an hour to every single person that has been included on that discussion. So let's say you're the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, the Project Manager, or whoever else, whatever the role names are, sitting on a table and discussing what's going to make it in the next sprint or release. And you go defect after defect, and those are like already 3 or 4 people. So that's for every defect. If you spend an hour, that's 3 hours wasted. Then sometimes if it's a really old defect, you're like, I think we fixed that one. Did we? Yeah, we did. I think we did. Wasn't that this discussion? Wasn't that like fix that we did? The database fix, and those defects start having nicknames. Why? Because we spend too much time on them, because that's a waste. So, we had a rule. If a defect's not being fixed 2 releases in a row, close it. Get rid of it. And it's okay. It's perfectly okay not to fix it. If the customer hasn't complained about it, it's not a defect. And if the customer complains about it, it's in the system. Don't delete it from the system. Don't make it disappear. Most systems have like statuses like will not fix or, deferred or not addressed or whatever. Just mark it and will not fix and close it. If somebody ever complains from it, you hear about it and you fix it. It's simple as that. But don't waste your energy on that. It's just a waste. Every time a QA is working on a performance script, let's say. Yep, go on.
What are your thoughts on test-driven development?
It's a great tool. It's a great tool. I'll talk about it in just a tiny bit. I'll talk about all the different tools. But it's an amazing tool. But as I said, it ends up depending on your situation. Can you make it happen? Is it worth making it happen? For example, if your team is not at that stage, what is the return of investment to get there? Because there are a lot of other practices that can help you be successful too. So it's perfect. It's a very, very good tool. Every time we distract someone, a developer writing code, or you QA actually writing a script, and then the developer comes and goes like, hey, that defect that you submitted, it works for me. No, it doesn't. No, it works for me. No, here's a test server, it doesn't work. But it works for me. Yeah, because you have a debug version on your product, on your machine, so yes, it works. But once you install it, without that debug version, it doesn't work. Well, I don't know how to fix that. So then there is like another 2 or 3 hour discussion that happens. That's, again, waste of time that could have been prevented one way or another. So whenever you start thinking about every action you do, is it a waste? Is it making me successful? Is it making me productive? Is it helping me deliver to the goal? And we go back to the retrospectives. because that's when the conversation happens. That's when the analysis happens. That's when the open conversation between the teams happen to have that discussion. The third part here, people first. So Lean puts a lot of emphasis on people, a lot. Why? Because people make things happen. Not machines, not script, not managers, not leaders, the people that do the work. Not agile coaches who just like talk around and tell you everything that you can do better, but people that actually sit down, write code, test product, write automation, they make things happen. They need to be your fault. Highly motivated teams, highly motivated individuals with zero skill set or knowledge can turn around and make a product success. Unmotivated teams with unmotivated individuals with all the knowledge and all the tools they have on their hands, they can make the product fail. Why? Because they don't care. So making sure you always put people first is really critical for the step of success. Listening to them, working with them, making sure their opinions happen. One more point before I move on here is, so I've been really lucky to have a great relationship with a lot of people I work with. And I've been really lucky that no matter what my position, I've managed to maintain a very good and just hearty relationships with the people I care about. And it has driven me insane how many times I walk into a room where you have, let's say, 2 developers and a QA sitting there chatting, having lunch, having fun, and I'll be like, hey guys, how's the project going? You know, are you still on time? And then there are laughs in the room. Yeah, right, we're gonna be about 2 months late. I'm like, well, I was just in the project meeting and your project manager said everything's on track. He's like, yeah, he's dreaming. Did you tell him he's dreaming? Why should I? Well, because you kind of miss that knowledge, you know, doesn't he? Oh, he's a slob. He doesn't need that knowledge. He'll figure it out sooner or later. Like, he told us we gotta be done by this date. We told him it's not gonna happen. Did he listen to you? No, he never listens. Okay. So 9 out of 10 times, when I go and talk to a person, they can tell me, can we get the thing done or can we not get the thing done? They can say, no, I don't know. I never know. They know because they're the one doing the work. And every time I walk into a room and ask someone, hey, how's that project doing? Are you ready for the release? I don't know when the release date is. Why? I don't care. I mean, I have that work, I'll get it done. But didn't you know your release is in a week? Oh, really? Well, it's not gonna be in a week. Okay. Did your project manager? No, he didn't ask. He never asked. The burn-up looks good though, so he's fine with that. I made it look good. How did you make it look good? Hey, in our teams, we draw burn-ups. You do what? We draw the burn-ups. How? Well, we've calculated that every single day we have to take this many hours from the task in order for our burn-up to look great.
Wow.
Does it? Yeah! Everybody praises us, we're the best team. Everybody loves our burn-ups. Okay. And you're not going to be there on time. No way. 2 months late at least. Maybe 3 if that performance issue takes longer time than we expected to. Okay. So what do? Do I go talk to the project manager or I'm like, talk to the guy, please tell him. So people first. They hold the knowledge. Second part, critical change management. So this is something really, really interesting. I found it crazy fascinating when I read the book The Goal. A spoiler alert, it's not a theoretical book. It's a love story of a production plant manager who saves his marriage while he's trying to save his plant from being shut down. It's really nice. It's kind of almost like a chick flick. It's great. You know, it's very nice. But so they talk about a few things when it comes to critical chain management, which is really important to remember and to think about when you do your retrospective, when you think about how you're planning your project and your process. And those things are emphasis on what is needed to do the tasks. So when you do your initial planning, do you always make sure that you know exactly what is needed to do the task? You have exactly what's needed to do the task. Whether it be knowledge or people or resources or anything like requirements. Do you know how you're going to test it? Anything that is needed for you to complete that task. Are you familiar with it? Do you understand it? Or you're saying, yeah, I'll get it done, and then you figure it out as you know. So this is something really important, and it happens at this happens at a relatively larger scale. In order for a project to be successful, is to put that emphasis on what is needed to do the tasks. Not at a sprint level. A sprint level is great. You need to carry it down, but you need to carry it up. You need to carry it upwards so that you know when you actually start planning the deadlines. Because again, Agile is great. Agile is about change, about being flexible, but very often we need to have a product, we have a committed deadline, we have some form of a commitment that the world wants from us and expects from us. How are sales going to sell if they don't know what you're going to release next? How are they going to attract new customers? How's marketing going to market the product? So there are all these dependencies. So when you do that initial planning, you need to do that homework so that you know you can be successful in that longer term. The other part is the use of implicit dependencies. So this is something also very important, is that very often when we start doing something, we assume things. We assume, let's say I write a requirement for a pen, and I say, Mr. Developer, I need you to produce a pen. So the developer goes and says, okay, I'll give you a pen. So 2 months later, he comes and says, here it is, you have a pen. Oh, but it's a ballpoint. I wanted a gel pen. Well, you didn't say that. Well, I only write with gel pens. I didn't write with. That's like, why would you even think I'll like that pen? Okay, fine, here's a new pen. But it writes blue. I never write in blue, I like black. Well, how am I supposed to know that? Okay, go fix it. Here's a black one. Oh, I wrote 10 pages and it's done. Well, you didn't tell me how long you need to be able to write. Well, I want at least 100 pages, not less. So all of those things are implicit to me because I assume them. I assume that a pen that is perfect to me is a gel pen that writes in black and that can write at least 100 pages. It's not the same for everyone. So making sure those implicit requirements are being understood and met are very, very important. The person to ask about those requirements, product owners, project managers, pretty much the people that write for you those requirements. But a very good example of implicit requirements are performance, security, scalability, so expectations, stress expectations, and so on and so forth. So pretty much anything that you can think that you would typically assume you need to make explicit. So managing and making the implicit requirements explicit. So the next part is good enough is good enough. So we go back to the point where when you produce software, you're looking to meet somebody else's expectations. You're looking to meet somebody else's assumption and understanding of what quality is and of what good product is. So spending too much time in making it perfect, it's not gonna make a good good for anything. There's actually a scientific proof that says that the return of investment from making something from good enough to great or perfect is actually not worth it, because in these last 10% where you spend to perfect the issues, it's actually going to be, you lose more money than actually if you get it out of the market, then get feedback, and that's to your point, like constant feedback. Just be out there as fast as you can with something good enough, with something that answers the person's expectations, so that you can get feedback and you can move on. The next one is the identification of buffers. So there is this thing that's called, the Parkinson law, which says that whatever estimate you are going to do is going to be 50% wrong. So it's either going to take you 50% less time or 50% more time. So let's look at, for example, a story point. If you say something's a 3, it can actually either be a 1 or actually be a 5. So I like estimating in the Fibonacci sequence when it comes to story points, because it very well addresses this law, because the larger your story becomes, the more your risk becomes. So like if you look at a story that's a 2, and you say, well, if it's a 50%, this way or that way, it could be either 1 or 3, so depending on the team, it might be very small variance. But if you are doing something that's 21, now that gap becomes much larger if it grows this way or the other way. So creating those buffers and identifying and creating those buffers actually helps you to make sure that whenever you commit to a plan, you've taken into consideration that 50% variance on the different tasks and on the different stories, and the fact that if you say you're going to do it in 1 month, it might take 2 months. And then the second part is managing the project by managing the buffers. Not exactly looking at, are you completing every task on time? It does not matter. It matters, are you eating up your buffer or if you're not? Because if you're eating up your buffer and eventually at a certain rate you're going to hit the release date, you're still not going to be done and you're still going to have work to go through. And if you're not, then you're okay and you're on track. And just in a little bit, I will show you a slide of the way we actually monitor the buffer. We called it a release forecasting, which actually we paid attention to see how the forecast, like are we going to be done on time and how the forecast is going to do. We didn't actually measure daily, not daily, but burnouts and burndowns. We kind of paid attention to them for the team at the daily stand-up, just to get a general idea of where we are going. But the release forecast was actually much more accurate and much more important to measure. The second part of the critical chain management is actually what actually teaches you is something really interesting, is that every system, it has a constraint. The constraint is not the place where you find the problem. So the constraint might not be the place where you find the problem. Let's say we don't have enough time for tests, right? The constraint can be somewhere up the line, and you need to find it. Why didn't we have time for tests? Well, because the developers didn't give us the code on time. Why didn't the developers give us the code on time? Well, because the story wasn't clear, and or for example, because we didn't know the technology, and we had to do a research. Well, why didn't we have a spike story to understand and do the research before that? Well, because the way that the story was written, we expected that we know everything. Why? And so on and so forth. So you do an analysis, and you go through your system. You go through your manufacturing plan, trying to find your constraint, trying to find your bottleneck. And the most important part is that a system is performing with the speed of its weakest link. So where your bottleneck is, it sets the pace for your whole system. For example, if you don't get good quality stories, You can optimize your development and QA process like crazy. You can be at a one-push development and testing and everything, and you can do automated absolutely everything. The developers might even write a code to write the code that they need. It doesn't matter because the stories are not going to come with the necessary speed. And so you have a whole bunch of optimization just sitting idle. So it's very important to identify the constraint and exploit the constraint. Make sure that you make your constraint work to the best of its abilities. Make sure that that bottleneck, that constraint that you found is the one that actually is well utilized. It doesn't stay idle, it's very optimized, it does the best thing for the system. Subordinate the system to the constraint. So this is something that is really, really, really interesting. So in any type of production world, software development or factory production or anything, people hate looking at people being idle. So if it's 10 o'clock and you're sitting there on your computer playing a game of chess with somebody online, you're not only looked at with a very good opinion from your team or your managers, like, why are you playing chess? Like, why can't you be doing something productive so you feel okay? I go and do something, right? But the important thing here to know is that an hour lost at a bottleneck is an hour lost for the entire system. An hour saved in a non-bottleneck is worthless. Why? Again, going back to the point, if you have a product manager that's not writing stories with the necessary speed, do you see how I kind of went to blame the product managers? I didn't want to blame the developers or the QA, so I kind of find another spot. But it can be everywhere, right? It can be actual QA, it can be developer, it can be any type of manager or procedure or machine. Constraint can be anything. The constraint can be your build system because it's building things too slow and it takes 12 hours to do a build. And the constraint can be, your automation because it's taking a week to run and so on and so forth. So it can be a lot of things, right? So I apologize to product managers that I blame them right now. But the thing is that if the product manager is taking a while to write the story, and if you're making the developer work on something, what is he working on? If there are no stories to be worked on, if everything's perfect, why is he working? He's not producing money. He's a full-time employee, so he's getting his salary one way or another. He's creating waste. He's creating inventory. He's creating code that might not be part of this release, might need additional testing, might be at a point where the bottleneck's finally moving along. He's at a point where he turns into the bottleneck because now the code that he wrote, for example, will need to be tested, will need to be verified, will need to be put into the system, will need to be built, and all of a sudden now the fresh stories are not being worked on because we were working on something that actually didn't need to be worked. So this is something very, very interesting and very life-changing when we've been making those transitions, is that if you're not the bottleneck, go have coffee. Unless you can do something for the last point of elevate the constraint. So I work with some great teams where developers, QAs have been actual constraint, meaning too much tests to actually be performed in a timely fashion. Developers go and test. Is it of the skill set of the developer to test? Yes. Is it of the skill set of the developer to write test cases? No. Test scenarios, not the actual automation tests and the execution of the test, but actually coming up with the ideas. The reason why I say no is because very often QA requires a particular mindset that's further away from the actual development. I have a great story for a developer testing where it was a last minute rush. The person was going through all the tests, executing tests, and doing things, and then we had a great QA manager who trusted but verified. She's sitting right there. So she always would get, by the end of the day, just go through quickly, make sure that all the tests were run correctly. And then she sees that a very mission critical test for the machine is failing. But it was marked as a pass. So she goes to the developer and says, "Did you test this?" "I did." "And it's okay." "No, it's not. It's failing." "No, it's not. It's passing." "How is it passing? Here, look at the result. Look at the machine." He's like, "No, I checked the code. It's written to behave exactly as you see it." "Yes, but the customer expectation is that it's not to behave like that. It's to behave in a different way." So, needless to say, after a few iterations, after the people did that more often, they did develop the skill set and they did develop the mentality. But again, great teams get together, do stuff together to elevate those constraints. They help with the skill set they have. They would write automation. They can do performance tests. They can utilize a lot of their skill set and efforts to help the constraint. In the situation where the project management, for example, person writing the stories have been a bottleneck, we would get team members stand in for him, writing and analyzing stories, and being the contact with these guys, so he'll do the final verification and so on.
I guess on the comment you made about developers don't necessarily have the mindset of the tester, I think it really would depend on how much domain expertise that team has. Because I've worked with elite teams where they're in a very specific niche, they know it even better than the product because they've been building these over and over and over again at very big companies, right? So
Yes.
I would say I might qualify that personally to say, hey, it depends on the developer. If they care enough about the product and they've been working and they've built an expertise, they might be able to actually design the scenarios better than their new product people that are going through.
Correct.
Right.
That is
I just thought I'd add
that is absolutely on point. It very much depends, and that's why I said it depends on the skill set at the end of the day. It depends on a lot of things, but the whole point is elevate the constraints. So I kind of sidetracked, but yes, if a developer has the skill set, can test, they should test if, for example, the bottleneck is test instead of writing new code. If they can't do it, it's okay for them to sit idle. So that's the point. It's make sure you always take out of your system what you need without creating any more waste and without overcommitting. And then repeat. Because bottlenecks and constraints have the bad habit of moving around.
Would you please share an example of elevating the constraint from your experience?
Yes. So for example, one of the examples that I have is actually regarding the story writing, which is one of it's kind of a favorite of mine because in our case, in one of the cases, the product manager was actually the constraint. He wasn't able to get these stories with the necessary quality and with the necessary details that a development team needed in order to be able to work on and fully understand. There were a lot of implicit requirements that were missing. So what we actually did was created a team. We actually called it a Backlog Team. And that was the team that was responsible for the backlog. So it consisted of the product manager, an architect, well, hands-on architect, so developer was a really senior one responsible for the overall architecture of the product, a QA person, and the project manager. So those 4 people, each one of them could actually write stories completely from their point of view, and were responsible together to create the backlog. And a lot of times actually the QA person will step in and write the acceptance criteria, and then we'll sit down with the product manager and say, hey, let's look through the acceptance criteria and make sure that all these acceptance criteria are okay, because that's what we're going to do. And then from there, back to your point with the acceptance criteria, what we did was, because the QA was another constraint we had, or another small bottleneck that we had at the time, we actually utilized test-driven development, where we said, okay, now our acceptance criteria are great. The next thing we're going to do is first write all the tests that cover the acceptance criteria. So we'll write all the tests will be written down, positive, negative, like everything that we can think of. We will spend an hour with the whole team to review them. Very importantly, we would waste everybody's time for 1 hour, a team of 10 people, 10 hours to review every single test. Why?
Why do you call it a waste? Your quality assurance manager, it's not a waste. That's the only word I would say.
I'll get to that. That because it actually, yes, it's not a waste. It helped us get better tests. It helped us get better understanding of the requirements of what we're trying to build. And when the developer started building the actual software, he can look through all the tests and make sure that every test is already built into the product he's building. And then once it moved to QA, at that same time, QA would write the automation, and then once the code's ready, voila, we're all done. We can just run the automation, look at the code. It's a perfect scenario. So yes, to your point, at that point, it was not a waste. In the beginning, everybody thought it was a waste. So why I'm sitting here in this meeting for 1 hour when I can actually be writing the code for that story, which will take me, by the way, 1 hour. Because when you think about it at the end, it didn't take you 1 hour, it took you 3 hours. Because you didn't think about 10 of the scenarios, for example, and QA would have been returning them and so on and so forth. So this is one of the examples how we managed to do one of the constraints around project management.
Since you're talking about some professional roles, what is your BSA doing? You have QA, you have developers, what is BSA?
BSA, business systems. So, depending on the size of the team, in some of the teams, we had that person actually sit instead of the product manager, and then he will do the communication with the product manager or product owner. In the case of a smaller team, it was the product manager sitting. So whenever I use that name, I use the role, the person that uses the role. But usually the way we scale is that if you have, let's say, 10 teams, each one of the team has, whether you call it a requirement analyst or business system analyst or a product owner, different places, different teams come up with different names, but they would all converge to the product manager. So the product manager will talk with them and discuss with them, give them high-level requirements, then they work with the teams. Does that make sense? The third part is people. So this is a really great circle. It's inspired by the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and it's a circle of values or principles, if you want to tell them. And this is something that I was introduced from a great person I used to work with, Matt Yelbacks, and he is like a really amazing person. But so we have a circle of 5 things: communication, accountability, trust, commitment, and power. Those things, if they do not exist within a team, nothing of what I talked so far can happen. Because communication. So let's start the circle. It's kind of hard to start the circle, but let's start the circle with trust. You cannot build trust without communication. You just cannot. You cannot walk into a room and say, hey, trust me. Communication, I kind of did that today, but communication and communication with everyone is what builds trust. Once you have trust, now you can have empowerment. The project manager I talked about, he didn't have the trust for his teams. He didn't empower his team to tell him when they can do something, when can they actually deliver something. So then the team didn't have commitment and they didn't feel accountability towards the person. So if you have trust, then you can empower people. You can let people do their thing and trust them when you tell them, when do you think we can get that story done? Or when do you think how many stories we can get in that sprint done? You can trust them that you can empower them to give them that question and they can give you that answer. Empowerment drives commitment. Only committed people actually do work. If you're not committed, you're not going to get it done. I mean, you might eventually, but you're not truly going to put your passion into getting it done. And then you cannot have commitment without accountability. Like you might be committed, but like there is something and someone that needs to hold you accountable to your commitment, because it's not a real commitment if you don't have the accountability. And then it circles back to communication, because you cannot have accountability unless you have communication. And accountability, don't get me wrong, it's not something that say, if you don't do this on time, you're going to be fired. That's not accountability. Accountability is actually being to that person, helping him or her grow and get through their commitments. A really nice quote I like about this is, if you're building a culture where honest expectations are communicated and pure accountability is the norm, then the group will address performance and attitudes. So this is something about that team. That exclusive circle, if you have a team that works within that circle, people that don't feel the trust, commitment, and accountability model, they're not going to be part of your team. So that's how you can empower and trust even more, because the team will ensure that you have a motivated team of highly motivated and successful individuals. So I have a few more slides left. So here is a summary of the process. Understand your constraints. Always make sure you know what are the constraints and the bottlenecks you have in your system. Understand the expectations. Why you're doing what you're doing. What do you need to be doing? And that's at every level. That's requirements, that's product delivery, that's behavior, that's everything when we talk about expectations. Quality strategy. So this is something that we started developing, and I will give you a quick example of a quality strategy.
Hi, sure.
Yeah, you don't need to read it. So this was our way to make, you can read it actually, it's perfectly impossible. I snapshot it from a PDF that I have, so it's completely jumbled up. But it's probably good because it was actual word things. And so this was a strategy where you make every single thing explicit. We started with process, we started with tests and documents that we needed to deliver, we started with test types that we needed to do, we started with development practices, and so on and so forth. Every single thing listed. Formalizing implicit dependencies on constraints. Create understanding of what needs to be done in order to successfully plan and assess the time frame. So this is back to involve the team. These are the people that know how long something is going to get done. Listen to them. Make sure they understand what you need. Make sure what are your expectations at every different level, and they will help you build the system you need to build everything into the system: performance, scalability, quality into the system. You're gonna build it in. Get your buffers in. So buffers don't have to be 50-50. It depends. You grow and you learn with your team, and you understand how are their off schedule. The buffer can be 10%. The buffer can be 20%. And then the last part is I didn't put the last part in, sorry, it's measure everything. So everything looks like a chaos at this point. Everything looks like, if you're a project manager, everything looks that it's completely out of your control, and you have a whole bunch of guidelines of how you need to make people comfortable, get them involved, make the decisions, and all you feel to do is like you're there to do the bookkeeping. But measurement are the most important things for you to look to make sure that the project's moving along the right way. 2 goals here I'm going to go through very fast. The first one is what you measure, you get. So be very, very careful. There was a deal board that was really funny and was saying our new project manager wants to see how many defects we fix. So I'm going to write myself a minivan today. So be careful what you measure. That's what you get. The second one is the ability to simplify means to eliminate the unnecessary so the necessary may speed. So this is something very important. Measurement for the sake of measurements are no use. You have to make sure that the measurements you look at are the ones that are gonna make you understand the product you build in. Embrace that you have no control unless you're the one doing the work. And measures take time. So it's okay to measure more things than you actually need if you have the capacity. But make sure that what the people see and what the people look at are the measures that actually matter and mean for the goal of your project. And this is where it goes back to make sure everything is understood and what you're trying to achieve. And this is the last slide. Oh, there's one more, but so this is the last slide. These are the things we looked into. So the forecast was actually a modified Baurer that was showing us the red uncompleted stories, new story points, green completion of story points as they went out, and then as it fades out, that was the forecast, meaning that if we continue with that velocity, that's how we're going to move along the time. The blue, for example, is where we are expecting to be done. And so looking at that forecast, we know that we're eating our buffers before we can release. So we need to do something and adjust something. Looking at the burn up or the burn down by itself doesn't necessarily, do you too much good, at least in my experience. Being able to forecast and to see how you're moving along was the one thing that helped us along. The second one, manage the overhead. This was the nice name we put for our defects. We call them the overhead. So this is everything we did, and we didn't manage to prevent them, avoid them, and let them sneak into the system. So managing those two trends, or those trends, we separated them by severity. So red are severe, blah blah blah. Yellow are major, green are minor. So managing them, we were seeing how throughout time, how we were adding overhead to the system. Every defect that wasn't fixed was getting there. And we had also a very strict rule that we do not submit defects for stories currently in play. So if you're working on a story, we communicated through tasks in our system to make sure that the story gets completed, because a story with an open defect or an open issue is not complete, it's not done. Very rigorous done criteria. So this was everything that we found, and we decided we're not going to fix. So the true overhead that we left in the system. And then the last one was the defect detection ratio. So this metric was our true measurement of quality. So these ones were all the defects that were found through the system after the system was released. So these were all the defects that were found by customers. And we would compare them to the defects we found internally, so we can see if we actually end up doing a better job throughout than our customers. Why? Because we wanted to make sure that our quality efforts are pointed at the right direction. Because if your QA tests a lot but finds less defects than the customer, then it means that you're not testing the product properly. The customer is using it in a different way. If the defect ratio is relatively small, means that you find more defects than the customer, you're kind of okay. Defects will always be there. Customers will always find them. Last slide. Remember the best practices. So this is the very last slide. So I talk a lot about principle, a lot about mindset, a lot about how we actually think to transform our process. But don't forget the best practices. Test-driven development, behavior-driven development, automation, so on and so forth. All of those are best practices that enable you to be successful. So those need to be included in your analysis at the end. That was it.
Any questions?
Can I ask a question about how the game is talking, giving us examples of how the team hiring managers that say, oh, we will not deliver, we cannot do this. That's interesting. I never been in this situation, so usually I know exactly what's going on and talking to the teams. How do you do this? When the team tells you that, how do you personally, what's your next step?
I usually push them to communicate with the manager. It's not my job to go. So see, it's a point of trust. The fact that they came to me and told me, I have their trust. I'm not going to break it by going to a third person and telling them, he said that. An agile coach. Just a bystander. I usually talk to them, encourage them, drive them to make the proper decision. And if they don't,
So you don't have any missing project to be finished on time, or
No.
or to teach them the proper way of just doing Agile, because the comments shows that just they are not doing the proper Agile.
I would usually do that with them. I'll have those discussions with them. I will try to figure out where the breakdown occurred. But whenever there is a problem, especially when we talk about the delays, they need to communicate that to the project manager. Yeah, the coaching experience was a little bit different, just from the point of view that I didn't coach those particular teams on a daily basis. I would go there to do trainings and to work with them, but not necessarily sit on every one of their meetings and make sure sit on every one of their retrospectives. When I see a consistent behavior happening, I would usually go and offer the project manager or the scrum master to run a retrospective for him. So as a third person to introduce like a different environment for the team, but it was his choice to accept or not.
Any other questions?
What's your opinion on velocity reports?
They're useful. They cannot be compared. That's the one thing, like I often get that question, what if team A has 5 story point velocity and team B has 10 story point velocity? Team A has 5, team B has 10. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's their way of estimating. What I've done in large projects where we have a lot of different teams that have different velocity, we would, when we created that release forecast, we would look at the cumulative velocity. So like all 10 teams, let's say team A will have 5, team B will have 10, Team C will have 15, so the cumulative will be 30. So we'll make our calculations with 30, and we didn't care which team is better than another. Doesn't matter.
All right. Thank you. Great. Like your dashboards, very good, and where you expressed it as overhead. I think that's something that I learned. What did you learn today? Hashtag. What did you learn?
Everything is about money. That's what I've learned.
Oh, that's good, right? That's like back to basics. Yeah. What else did you learn?
It cannot happen without communication.
Okay, great. You?
Those look like good books. Could you show the small with the books again?
Yes.
Yeah, I can.
Until that time, what did we learn today?
I like the overhead. I will take it.
Yeah, that's a good one, right?
Overhead, yeah.
Yeah.
It was worth the drive from Campbell here.
That's great.
It was worth the drive.
Oh, worth the drive, all right, perfect. That's a great comment, thank you. Thank you. These are those books, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Agile Testing, Go, and Lean Thinking. And we promised this to be on the slide share or something, and you can give me the link so that I can post it to the, yeah, that sounds good. So you'll have these books in the slides anyway. You don't have to take a picture and note it down. Also, I'm going to take a picture of those things there. So if you have other job requirements or if you're a job seeker, write down there. Takeaways, we talk about those takeaways. Any other takeaways? I heard like 3 or 4. There's 5th one left. One more? Yeah.
I need to have a discussion with my boss about constraints.
Constraints, I like that. So one little comment about velocity charge. So, my basic is telling me that I should talk about that. I'm an Agile coach as well. So that question I can answer. So what you should compare is not the velocity, but the cycle time. Cycle time is something that you get a requirement on the date to the requirement that got delivered. And whatever the story points, if you make an average of how many story points did you get in that time, that means a specific functionality went out in a certain period. That's your cycle time, and that doesn't change with teams. Delivery is delivery, right? So you get an index, and that's called cycle time. You can read more about it. And cycle time is perfectly, like, when I was at Yahoo, I had about 15 teams to look at, and our average cycle time was about 12 days and 69 minutes, 12 days, 12.69 days basically. And after discussion with the senior director there, we decided that we will come up with a goal of 3.69 days. This is a huge jump from 12.69 to 3.69, and it looked impossible. So we started looking at things. It went into a lot of good things like, can we automate this? Because it's about delivery, right? So what are our delays? Can we figure out those delays and reduce them? So can we check in and not go home? Can we check in until it's built? Can we do automation so we are not testing it and not getting surprises? And by the end of 6 months, we could get to about 3.6. So that actually is the real agility that you're looking at. Comparing velocity is going to get you nowhere. A manipulation of calculations. Because these are engineers, they can do 2 plus 2 is 5 or 8 you want. Right? You don't want to do that. So that's just a nugget from me. Alright, cool. So we talked about those five outcomes of this meeting. If you can take time, if somebody just talk about those takeaways, we can take next 2 minutes to write those down, push those into our takeaways, and if you have further feedback for us, do let us know before you go. And there's some more sandwiches there. So, take it for yourself, for your significant other, your kids, whoever. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you next month.